गुड आफ्टरनून एंड वेलकम टू गना शॉट। गना शॉट में आप सबका स्वागत है। आज हम कासा वेबिनार करेंगे लुकिंग अहेड इन मणिपुर, और उसके साथ उसके लिए हमारा जो को फाउंडर जनरल गौतम मूर्ति और पूरा पैनलिस्ट प्रस्तुत हैं। वेलकम टू ऑल ऑफ यू लेडीज एंड जेंटलमैन। It's my honor to host you on Gana Shot. This is a Casa webinar. This is the second webinar we're having on Manipur. And to do further honors, I request General Gautam Murthy to continue. So over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, General Shankar. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and Jai Hind. On behalf of Team Casa, I, Lieutenant General Gautam Murthy, founder and managing director of the Current and Strategic Affairs Forum, on behalf of Team Casa, welcome all of you to this important discussion. And as General Shankar said, our second on Manipur, our 42nd webinar so far. This discussion on Manipur comes close on the heels of one which we had last month on the 20th. Manipur continues to hog the headlines for all the wrong reasons. Just 3 days ago, on Thursday, the police had to fire tear gas shells to disperse stone pelting mobs in and around Imphal, some of them led by Mira Paibis, who were demanding the release of 5 mighty men who were arrested by the police for carrying sophisticated weapons and donning camouflage uniforms. That they have been released by the court is another matter. But this followed a 48-hour shutdown called by the mighty groups. There is a curfew that is on. The timings have been curtailed. Although mobile internet services are being restored, the situation is far from normal. The ethnic divide persists, fault lines run deep, and within inverted commas, borders have been marked. Groups of villages, as we all know, have their own militias and post lookouts to see if there are any transgressions. The future at present, sorry to say, seems bleak. However, it cannot and should not remain so. So, is there a way out? What does looking ahead bring to the two warring communities? How does the state government and the central government handle the situation going forward? To get a sense of what we can expect, we have a very expert panel with Casa today. Our first speaker of the evening is Mr. Rajat Sethi, who is India's leading political commentator and public intellectual. He has had over a decade of experience in shaping public discourse and setting political narratives. Rajat has served as a political advisor to 3 chief ministers of India, that is Jharkhand, Assam, and Manipur, assisting them in policy matters concerning internal security, political economy, and development at the rank of the Minister of State. Rajat is a regular TV commentator and shares his views on diverse subjects on politics, strategic affairs, and economy. He is also a columnist with India's news dailies like NDTV, Hindustan Times, and the Indian Express. He is a public policy graduate of the John F. Kennedy School of Government at Harvard, management graduate of MIT Sloan School of Management, and an engineering graduate of IIT Kharagpur. He's worked as a visiting senior fellow with globally leading think tanks like India Foundation, Observer Research Foundation, Stimson Center, focusing on foreign policy, security, strategy, and internal trade. He's currently serving as the president of the Aravali Forum, a leading public policy think tank based out of Delhi. Welcome, Mr. Rajat Sethi. We look forward to your insights, given your close association with the government of Manipur. Our next speaker is Ms. Patricia Mukhim, who's currently editor of the Shillong Times, one of Northeast India's oldest English dailies, and she's authored a book, Waiting for an Equal World. She's been on the National Security Advisory Board and former board member of the Indian Institute of Mass Communication. Patricia writes extensively on issues in India Northeast and has received several journalistic awards. She was conferred with the Padma Shri in the year 2000. Welcome to this Casa webinar, Patricia, and given your vast experience, and since you have a ear to the ground, contacts, etc., we look forward to hearing what you say. Our third speaker is Lieutenant General Vinod Bhatia, PVSM, AVSM, SM Retired General Bhatia superannuated after 40 years of distinguished service in the Army as the Director General of Military Operations. He was also the Colonel of the Parachute Regiment. He was instrumental in giving the much needed focus to capability development and capacity enhancement along our northern and eastern borders. An alumnus of the Defence Services Staff College, the Army War College, and the College of Defence Management, and the National Defence College. He has an MSc in Defence Studies as well as a Master's in Management Studies and an MPhil in Defence and Strategic Studies. He has had wide-ranging experience in command staff and instructional appointments. His higher command assignments include that of a mountain brigade in North Bengal Infantry Division on the line of control and an operational corps along the India-China border. His operation experience is varied and he has actively taken part in almost all operations that India has taken part in since 1974. He has had 4 tenures in the Northeast, including command of Assam Rifles Battalion. He has served in South Manipur, Churachandpur, Sumno, Kaching, and also in Imphal. He is a former director of the Center for Joint Warfare Studies. Welcome to the webinar, General Vinod Bhatia. With your vast experience, especially in Manipur, and knowing that you're watching the situation very closely, we look forward to hearing your views. Our moderator is none other than General P.R. Shankar, PVSM, AVSM, VSM, who's a former Director General of the Artillery, who really needs no introduction to the audience. General Shankar is now a professor in Aerospace Department of IIT Madras. He is actively involved in applied research and writes and speaks extensively on strategic issues. He has an old blog called Gunner's Shot, which is widely read and seen across 70 countries, including China and Pakistan. He has over 14,300 subscribers, an average of 2,000 hits per day, and has crossed an all-time readership as well as a recorded viewership of over 5 million. Welcome, General Shankar. Knowing you, we look forward to a very absorbing session and a question and answer session. Over to you, General Shankar. I won't take any more time. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, sir. And it's my honor to, moderate the second session on Manipur. I welcome all panelists and General Gautam Murthy, and I look forward to a very interactive and sensible session. We all know Manipur has been in problems for the past 5 months, 175 deaths, 4,000 weapons still missing. There's an ethnic divide, which I've never seen in this country since the partition, right, where communities have split. There's a buffer zone, as if there's a LAC. In fact, in the past 1 year, if I've heard this word buffer zone, past 2-3 years, if I heard the buffer zone, I've heard it between the PLA and the Indian Army and, Eastern Ladakh, and now in Manipur. It's quite, it calls for a lot of introspection. There are a lot of narratives flowing about the issues of land, the issues of drugs, the issues of, communal aspirations, or I wouldn't say communal aspirations, community aspirations, and religion going about. We have institutions like the Supreme Court or the EGI coming in and giving solutions to a problem which the government should solve, right? And to some extent, there is some issue between the state and the central forces. Again, for the first time, probably after the 90s in J&K, we are seeing, the state and government forces, almost on the opposing sides, or being painted as such or painted into a corner. How a government can allow this to happen is something beyond my comprehension. And there are no solutions in sight, really. We don't see solutions in sight. There might be a lot of, back channel discussions and to and fro and consultations. But the public at large is not happy about the whole affair. And when people are divided in this kind of a manner, there's a lot of hidden aggression which is going on and building up. It's like a pressure cooker kind of a situation. And we all know, and I'm sure many of those who are attending or who will be viewing this video will agree, right? We can do damn good at G20 and we can, tell Canada to take a walk after this Harjit Singh Nijjar's killing or whatever it is, for whatever reason. But we can't afford to have Manipur the way it is going. It's a border state. You have external influences, there are drug influences, X, Y, Z. If India has to rise as a power, its border has to be secure, and its people have to be secure. Most importantly, after all, India is somewhere where we need a people's resolution than more than any other solution which is forced on them. If the people don't accept it, we're not going anywhere. It is in this context that we are holding this second webinar with a different set of people who are going to talk, and we want you to look ahead and say what can be done in Manipur to take it to safer shores. It's going to be a long haul. Some of our ideas might not see the light of the day, but some ideas better than no idea. It is in this context, I'd first invite Mr. Rajat Sethi, who's coming direct from Manipur, to give his views. Over to you, Mr. Rajat Sethi. 10 to 15 minutes. After that, we'll then move on. Thank you, and over to you.
A very warm good morning to all of you, the esteemed panelists in the session, as well as the esteemed audience who would be listening to this very important topic. Thank you, General Shankar, for this opportunity and inviting me to this platform, and also General Murthy for for the introduction. I have spoken and aired my opinions on this topic at various national platforms, including various news portals, etc., over the past few months. However, I just wanted to reposition as to where I am coming from. I have served in the state as the principal political advisor to the state chief minister from 2017 till March 2022. I had moved out of that position thereafter, and it's been more than a year and a half, wherein I have had a more cursory view of how things are panning out, and try to just share where I feel some of the roadblocks have been in terms of finding a resolution to this problem. I would want to start off with one suggestion which I have sort of imbibed, internalized really well, is that all the stakeholders in this current problem in Manipur are all Indians. We should not be painting any section of the stakeholders. The stakeholders are Kukis, Meiteis, Manipur Police, Assam Rifles, intelligence agencies, governments, politicians, everybody. All these people are stakeholders. And I'm confident that every stakeholder believes that a solution should come out. But if you start painting one as a villain and the other as somebody who is the hero, that that framing in itself will not allow us to move forward. Therefore, in my humble submission here is, every stakeholder is currently trying really hard to find a way out. They are also sticking onto their ground and trying to see that they are doing justice to what their principal duties are. And in this entire scheme of things, somehow the logjam is such that that common ground, which should be there to allow negotiations to even kickstart or to begin, hasn't been created. And I think that is going to be a collective responsibility for all of us. Now, when I was serving there in the state of Manipur, I used to repeatedly hear one dialogue which a lot of civil society leaders across community lines, be it the Nagas, the Kukis, as well as the Meiteis, used to say, hey, please don't do this. The state is going to burn. I remember Naga framework talks were happening. Manipur was divided even because of that. Meiteis and Kukis were dead against any kind of a Naga settlement, and they were both on the same side. And they were virulent in saying that don't do anything on the Naga framework agreement, wherein our districts, our boundaries are even remotely touched, because if you touch that, the whole state will burn. Same goes with with rounds and rounds of Kuki interlocutor having talks with the Kuki groups. Both Nagas and Meiteis used to get together and say that, hey, if there is any kind of a deliberation on a Schedule 6 or anything remotely associated with a Schedule 6 solution to Kuki land, we would be up in arms and we will burn down the state. So this threat emanated out of this classic zero-sum problem that the state was entangled in. Anything that you tried to do in order to solve these decades of insurgency problems associated with each of these three communities, the other two communities used to gang up and try to threaten that any solution that you come up with is essentially going to burn the state. So this, I used to hear this for 5 long years, that burning the state, but I never internalized how bad can it actually be. Who all, I mean, if it's a handful of people, can the state and the and the entire governance machinery not clamp down? Can we not have a solution which is from a bird's eye view from center, who are not active stakeholders, can at least lay out some kind of a groundwork for moving ahead? Otherwise the NSC and IM talks can carry on for like several more decades without any end in sight. So somebody will have to take that step forward, and central government was doing effectively that. Even with the Kuki talks, the state government was steadfastly against, further stretching the Sioux arrangement. They were of the clear position that how long will the Sioux continue? First of all, you are doing Sioux with a militant group which is not against India's sovereignty. Then why is the Indian government party to it? Why is there a Sioux arrangement in the first place? Because there is, and this has related in having proxy representatives of the people of Kuki. You have an elected set of representatives, but then you have these unelected set of militants. And why is government negotiating for Kuki solutions with these militants? So those questions were like coming up repeatedly, and at a point in time, the state government walked out of Sioux unilaterally. And I think that was all in the run-up to the election, to the current crisis. Uh, I also feel from a community standpoint, what has happened was that over a period of time, Manipur was trapped into almost no economic growth, uh, violence in the state, very little semblance of any rule of law in the region, all of that. But 5 years of good governance and proper law and order implementation, proper rule of law, no violent activities for 5 years, suddenly, gave them huge economic dividends to the community. I remembered that evenings used to be completely dull and dead in the Imphal Valley. Suddenly, because of the economic activity and a double-digit growth, we saw the city life brimming. Because of that, because of the short-term economic development that happened for these 4 or 5 years, we saw a direct pressure on the land prices. The land prices within the valley suddenly shot up. So a lot of people for whom land was an issue. It was a zero-sum problem issue with the other communities being able to buy the valley land. But once the prices start going up, then the pressure that a common Meitei was not able to procure or buy land, and they suddenly saw that the wealth was reaching to the tribal people as well, and they were able to prosper and buy property in the heart of Imphal. That sense, in my opinion, also drove one community, the Meitei community, into a feeling of claustrophobia. They felt that we are being on the north we have Nagas largely, and on the south it's Kuki, and we are all getting sandwiched between the two communities who are now even have the ability to buy our land, etc. That is another angle which further drove them to a brink. I for After speaking to several civil society leaders, etc., that clamor that we need an ST status wherein our land is protected, or we need an ILP, inner line permit, so that our land is protected, essentially became the proxy solutions for them when they were trying to find problems to something which is very core to them. But maybe these were not the right solutions. They tried ILP movement was carrying on for past 5-6 years, but around the CA protest they got it in a jiffy. They did not anticipate it. But the main purpose of ILP for the state of Manipur was essentially to protect the land. And they realized in a very short time that ILP did not do effectively anything for them. Similarly is the ST status and the clamor for that. At a point in time when I had started, visiting the state more frequently, there was barely 20 to 30% people even interested in an ST demand within the Meitei community. But once the economic pressure starts building up, we saw that the percentage of people demanding ST steadily grew in the state. A lot of surveys were being conducted and just trying to gauge the mood. So we thought, we started getting these additional signals. Now, why I'm not talking about the violence, I mean, because we've discussed about that ad nauseum, but these were some of the important building up issues which are still constant. Until we don't find a solution to that, a permanent negotiating ground would be very hard to establish. If we now fast forward ourselves to today, the challenges are threefold. First is that the Manipur police has largely been tasked to uh, ensure that the valley area is peaceful. There are combing operations, and the looted arms are again identified and brought back to the armories. That's the task which has been articulated and very clearly defined before the Manipur police. Assam Rifles has been largely tasked to ensure peace in the hills and ensure that combing operations in the hill happen, wherein they are able to identify all the weapons which are there with either the militants or the population in general, collect those and deposit those. So this is how the operational boundaries have been created between the two forces. And this is the reason why there are consistent confrontations and consistently portrayal that Assam Rifles is representing cookies only, and Meitei police is representing the Manipur police is representing the Meiteis only. That is more of an operational thing which has been done at the level of the security advisor. It's not out of choice. And I think therefore painting either of these two forces largely on communal lines is flawed. It is because of the operational constraints which they have been put in under, that what we are seeing, hearing, etc., is making both of these entities equal villains. And I think that's something to ponder over. In terms of the talks that are happening, I believe that separate administration is something that is being repeatedly discussed as a possible starting point for deliberations from the Kuki side. And both the Nagas and the Meiteis have clearly said that no touching of the boundary without having complete buy-in from both the communities. No such discussion should happen. So that's where the critical logjam is. Separate administration as a geographical possibility seems distant, because Kangpokpi and Chandel have mixed populations, and still they are geographically different from Churachandpur or separated from Churachandpur. So how do you build a geographical continuous thing is hard to imagine at this stage. And another thing is that balkanization of Northeast purely around communal lines is something where there is a slippery slope argument to it, wherein I believe that you start doing it for one community, it leads to the other community incentives to keep fighting and keep ensuring that they are further able to balkanize the Northeast. I don't see that being a potential solution to this problem. Essentially, Meiteis and Kukis and the Nagas have to live together, find a formula to live together. A lot of the tribals, both the Nagas and the Kukis, have their property. They have, through their hard-earned money, bought property in the Imphal Valley. I don't foresee them to, a lot of common Kuki community people would want to just leave those properties in the valley and just move to a hypothetical separate administration region. That also seems a distant possibility to me. Therefore, finding an end to Kuki militancy through closure of the Sioux talks amicably, that's one important thing that the central government should focus on. Second thing is that the due rights and due decentralization of power as well as finances that are enshrined in the constitution through Hill Area Committee should be implemented in letter and spirit. The Manipur's Hill Area Committee has vast powers. I can bet you that no stakeholders within Manipur and in the current crisis have actually looked into great detail as to what are the provisions and the powers that are enshrined in the Hill Area Committee. Hill Area Committee is almost a state within the state. And therefore the hill area committee provisions, if implemented in letter and spirit, can address maximum grievances of the tribal population of the state. So our constitution allows you that framework to go about and find a way wherein disproportionate development, more in the valley, less in the hills, such kind of problems can be structurally solved. So we should go back to the drawing board, open up those laws, understand if more additions or more clauses have to be added to the hill area committee, efforts should be put in to do that. So that is another area which I feel can be a roadmap to a problem, possible solution to the problem. And then it comes to a just closure to people who have been victims of violence on across the community lines. If there have been houses of the cookies which have been gutted down by Imphal, I think the Meitei community leaders should take a step forward and invite them and ensure that all kinds of protection is given to them. Similarly, the houses of Meiteis which have been raised in Churachandpur are again resurrected. The Kuki community steps in and rebuilds those houses along with the financial assistance which can come from the center. Both the community and the and responsible leadership of these communities will have to take steps forward to try and assist the other communities in rehabilitation. That's the only confidence building measure that I foresee. Everything else that is generally being discussed seems more of a negotiating position rather than a practical solution. I will stop here and would be happy to answer any specific questions that you might have. Thank you, sirs. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
I think there's something wrong with General Shankar's audio. General Shankar? Okay, there is something wrong with his audio. I just want to tell you, thank you, Rajat, for this wonderful exposition. There were a couple of issues that we were not aware of, and thank you for bringing it to our notice. Now over to Patricia. Patricia, please go ahead and say, give us your point of view of what is happening there and how we are looking at a way forward. Over to you, Patricia.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. Indeed, we are looking at Manipur, the way forward. This is the 143rd day since the violence broke out. And each day, some of us are trying to see how is it possible to create platforms for societal conversation when the divide is so deep. And coexistence, as of now, is well nigh impossible. Perhaps the only neutral force in all of this is the Indian Army, but we know that the Indian Army is also sent there with their hands tied, and therefore it's difficult for them to control the situation. Uh, After speaking with a few colleagues, we have come to the conclusion that there needs to be a Supreme Court monitored committee with a timeline to study the inherent and legacy problems around land in Manipur, and perhaps a clear declaration from the Geological Survey of India as to the mineral resources available in the hills, because this will prevent all kinds of wild assumptions. There's so much floating around that there is this mineral and that mineral, and that is why government of India is silent and is allowing people to kill themselves. Then we also need to take a look at the narco terrorism issue. This is a smoke and mirrors issue. There are allegations, there are counter allegations. Why is it that we do not have any clarity on this? Who are the beneficiaries of the drug trade, direct and indirect? We need to know this, and perhaps that Supreme Court monitored committee is the only one that can give us some clarity on this. The third point is that Manipur needs to have a cadastral survey to understand who actually holds how much land in that state. In a country governed by the constitution and with protective clauses like 371C, can we also have a parallel ancestral landholding system where a chief uh, owns land and allocates land to his son, and therefore you create a number of villages? Sometimes those villages intrude into the boundaries of the other tribes. Uh, I think there is a great need for land reforms in Manipur, because if you don't have that, you're never going to have any equity. Then we need to look at the power dynamics. Who calls the shots in Manipur? Is it the valley? Is it the people in the hills? Can we have an equalizer here? If you have 40 MLAs from the valley, and this is because of population, you have you have 40, and then you have 20 the from amongst the Nagas and the Kukis. Is there any way of bringing some equity here as well? Rajat spoke about balkanization of ethnic communities. But this is a legacy of India. We've created states based on language. The last language created state was Telangana. How do you go back on all this? It is a big problem in the Northeast where every ethnic community is looking for its own homeland. Here we have the Kuki people asking for a union territory like status. Now, I think it is at this very moment, it's very important to establish the rule of law. And the rule of law today in Manipur is such that the chief minister of Manipur can no longer go to the hills. I don't think he feels safe to go to the hills. And one asks this question persistently: why can't a man who's not acceptable to the hills be asked to leave and somebody else appointed in his place? You can use any instrument of the constitution, because Mr. Biren Singh, the chief minister, has lost the confidence of the hill people. It's impossible under his rule to expect any peace negotiations, anything that will bring down the violence to happen. So this is one of the things that I don't understand why government of India is lingering on this issue. As of today, every action of the state government is viewed with suspicion, and whatever it does for the hills, it will appear biased, prejudiced. And we know very well that the state administration as well is totally divided. The first consequence of the violence was that the DGP, Mr. Dongal, was removed and ceremoniously. Why was that? Why did that happen? It is because the valley didn't have enough faith in him and they believed that he might be biased towards his people. I think this sort of arbitrary removal of people from their positions, you're not following the proper procedures. There's another ADG who is also from the hills, and then he was asked to join the ITBP on deputation as IG. He was the ADG. The present crisis has really, it's thrown the whole police administration out of gear, because all those who belong to the hills, all the IPS officers from the hills, have been disbanded, have been asked to move away from positions that they were in. I don't know whether that happened in the case of the Meitei IPS officers, so we need to look at this as well. Uh, the cookies, as we know, they are in very senior positions and they comprise a relatively higher percentage in the state administration. But today they are not able to work in the secretariat in Imphal. It's not safe for them. Now, I don't know if the government of India is aware of this precarious situation that is in Manipur, where the students from the hills or the teachers from the hills who are teaching in Manipur University, who are teaching in RIMS Imphal, are not able to go back there to their jobs. How does this affect huge numbers of students? Of course, what you call the Indigenous Tribal Leaders Forum has written to the government of India's education department to ensure that these students are given a space somewhere in some of the universities in the country. But this is a very tall order, and these are things that we forget when we discuss the politics of it all. We forget the humanitarian aspect. We forget the fact that women in the relief camps in the hills are giving birth to babies and have no medical facilities. We also forget, or we don't know, or we're not aware of the fact that there are doctor volunteers coming in from Kerala and other places who are not allowed to go to the hills, who are being, not allowed to take medicines and carry those reinforcements to the hills. What kind of a situation are we in? Then you have this deep distrust on the central forces, especially Assam Rifles. You have Manipur police filing an FIR against Assam Rifles. This is unprecedented. And then, in such an environment, can we even imagine the rule of law to be there? So, unless the Supreme Court steps in, and I don't see any other independent institution in this country today that can, that can really try and bring in some amount of sanity into Manipur. We know that there is a CBI inquiry being conducted into all those atrocities and rapes and the reasons for the violence in the first place. But uh, the CBI has made very little headway. There is no such thing as a free and fearless investigation. There are a lot of interruptions, and those people we call the civil society. I don't believe that there is civil society in Manipur or in the whole of Northeast. We haven't developed a civil society that can rise above differences. So these are all pressure groups putting pressure on government, putting pressure on police to act the way they want them to act. These are the things that are very troubling in Manipur. Even the rehabilitation of displaced persons is not equitable. Those Meiteis who have been displaced from Chandel and other places, they were provided housing in the chief minister's own constituency in Imphal. But similar efforts have not been seen in the tribal areas. That is, I'm sorry to say this. Uh, Now, we need to have a dialogue for a sustainable political solution. But looking at the situation today, both the parties have come to a point of no return. And this is where one sees a very self destructive kind of movement trajectory from both sides. I think civil society, if there exists one, would need to realize that protection of life and property is the supreme function of the state, and no amount of civil society intervention can bring in law and order. Civil society can only create the space for such dialogues to happen so that the rule of law can be established. And I think a time has come when both in the hills and the valley, people have to realize that the guns are no solution to any problem. We have seen uh, the Sioux groups in the hills. They've had this suspension of operations for a long time. But why is there no solution? And as Rajat had said, there's no solution because any kind of solution with one group will result in, conflagration with other groups. So, how do you bring these warring groups together? And mind you, there are not just two warring groups, the Nagas are also there. Once you start talking of a final resolution to the Naga framework, there will framework agreement, there will be problems in that as well. So the Meitei demand for ST status is essentially to extend their influence to the hills and the adjoining plain areas. And Rajat has very, very succinctly put that it's the pressure on land. You have three very big malls in Imphal, all belonging to Kukis. And when the poorer Meiteis look at these big malls, they wonder at their own fates. So you see, this is where there's this inequitable distribution of resources, and land being the main resource. So I'd like to say that the Naga dream of Greater Naga Limb, the Kuki demand for a separate administration, union territory. I think all these demands we need to approach, or the government of India needs to approach on very cautiously, because it's like a tinder box. And at this moment, there is no sign of a climb down by anyone. Though, for us onlookers, it appears that at the moment, the Nagas and Meiteis seem to be on the same page. and both are anti-cookie. But and I don't know whether government of India is tacitly encouraging such dynamics. Is it suited? Is it suitable to their own narrative? I'm not so sure. And I think this is all I have to say at the moment. And maybe I can answer questions later on, because these are the points I've noted upon great, uh, you know, sort of introspection and discussion with people from the hills and the valley of Manipur. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, ma'am. You brought out a few very important things. Fundamentally, the fact that there are a lot of biases in the government and otherwise. You've touched upon the humanitarian aspects which are involved and which need to be brought in, because at this point of time, I do agree with you that the humanitarian aspect has been overlooked quite a bit. You spoke of the need for the civil society to create space for establishment of the rule of the law, which I think is missing because the civil society has always been fractured in Manipur, if you see. And you brought out a very important point, which I think is contextual, because in the three groups which are in Manipur, it's only two of them who are involved today. The third is just waiting to jump in, and it can jump in any day now if there's a solution which is not taken along. So the larger issue is it's just not a problem of between cookies and metis today. You have to have Nagas also on board. And if I may jump into it, I wonder why the government of India has not been using Nagas to broker peace. Maybe it's an out-of-the-box solution, but it could be something, but that's a different story. And I think between you and Rajat, you brought out a very, very important thing, that a lot of this is the price of economic development and land, which has come in because economic aspirations of people have gone up. So the simple tribal or the simple Metis or the valley thing, he's got his aspirations have gone up, and we need to cater for it. And both of you have so far given me the impression. That's why I left the army to the end, right? I started as being the army, I'm leaving it to the end. And both of you have given me the impression that from within Manipur, there's no solution which is going to come, right? Rajat spoke of Indian approach. Indian approach is beyond Manipur, where there are no villains, no heroes. I agree with him. And you need to have common ground. And that common ground, he said, we have to work from outside with a bird's eye view. And you spoke of a Supreme Court monitored committee which looks at the larger issues of narco terrorism, minerals, and land reforms. And I dare say there's also a huge external influence involved, and it's just waiting to come in. And I can give you a complete lecture on the way narco terrorism is going to blow up in this area, for the simple reason Taliban has closed down that narco factory in Afghanistan. Right, the entire narco shift thing will come to the Golden Triangle, and if that bursts, it is going to be a big thing beyond whatever we are doing. And this I have with proof. I've done a program on this separately. So we have a mega problem for which we have no solutions. But yet you brought out 2-3 things. One, you need an outside solution. There is a lot of trust in the army, right? And there's a lot of trust in our Supreme Court, which are two great institutions. I think today, if you look at it, you both of you have spoken of these virtually being the two last bastions. So with this, I don't have a Supreme Court lawyer or a judge on this panel, but I do have a retired general who was a DGMO, who served there, who's commanded an Assam Rifles battalion, and who knows these things backwards. So, General Vinod Bhatia, sir, over to you. Your views, you've heard both of them, and then I'll sum it up in the end and we'll take some questions. Before I hand it over to you, sir, I'd request those of you in the audience, I would like you to be, within bounds of, being nice and civil. If you people, anyone who is going to put up offensive comments, I'm going to time you out permanently. No one here in this panel has come out of own volition with a particular agenda. We have come here to solve a problem which is a national problem of ours, right? And there are no, like what Rajat said in the beginning, there are no heroes, no villains here. we are all equally to blame, or we are all equally going to be heroes tomorrow if we come out with even 1 point for a solution. Over to you, General Bhatia, sir.
Jain, and thank you, Jan Shankar. Thank you, Casa, and thank you, my fellow panelists. It's been honestly excellent listening to both of you. I'm a little far removed from Manipur right now, but having served almost all over Manipur, starting from Tulihar, Churachandpur, Sugnu, Chandel, Chakpikarong, Senapati, Saikul, Ukhrul, Yanganbokpi, Lakoching. These are names which are not at fingertips. And having walked most of the India-Myanmar border, but I've been far removed. And I think the challenge lies, as Rajat put it, for making it a zero-sum game between the stakeholders, and the major stakeholders being the Maitis, the Pukis, and the Nagas, to a win-win situation. How do we do that? Is a major challenge, and that is where I think we need to take our place. Long years ago, when Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, with the first Prime Minister, visited Manipur, he said, "This is the Switzerland of the East." And I've heard this dialogue very often, that the state will burn, like Rajat said, and the state is burning today. But let me start on a positive note. India has weathered such storms earlier, whether it was Mizoram in 1966, whether it was an emergency in 1975 or 1984 Punjab, 1993 Naga Kuki clashes, which went on for about 16, 17 months, and which were responsible for 300 odd deaths, including 16 children under the age of 6 were burned up in a single day. Right, so it is bad. Because the people of Northeast are very, very good. I have a lot of respect for them. But when they get violent, they get very violent. They are very happy people. I in my all service out there, I hardly remember seeing a child cry, because the family bonding is there, the tribal bonding is there. But when it comes to vindictiveness and vengeance, they get bad, and that is what we see today. Lack of trust in the government machine, which is possibly governance and administration a lot to blame for it. We have to also take the blame to let the situation come to a boil. Let me shoot straight as a soldier. I think it is politically motivated. I may be totally wrong, and I hope I'm totally wrong, but I think it's politically motivated. You look at things in 2004 when the Manorama Devi incident happened. 38 square kilometers of the Imphal Valley was, of the Armed Forces Special Powers Act was withdrawn from there. And since 2004 to present day, most of the violence incidents had happened in 38 square kilometers. And then we go on to withdraw the Armed Forces Special Powers Act from another 15, then plus 4, 19. And that has given rise to, I suppose, increase in violence post 2022. If you look at the violence figures for the last 5 years, and I've got them, I thought Manipur was going towards peace, and we should be looking at peace. There were 38 groups with SU, actually. 38 groups with SU. That is the groups. So whatever insurgents you call it, undergrounds you call it, terrorists you call it, we started off with underground, insurgents, and then terrorists, militant and terrorists. If you look at it, I thought that was a commercial enterprise. They're collecting taxes. They had stopped believing in the ideology. It was a commercial enterprise, and 38 groups were having the sue with the government of India. And if you look at the last 5 years, I'll read out the figures to you. 2019, there were 7 incidents, 4 civilians were killed, security forces lost none, 5 terrorists, total 9. 2020, 4 incidents, 1 civilian, 3 security forces, 3 terrorists. 2021 was an incident, 12, 8 civilians, 5 security forces personnel, 14 terrorists, total 27. Come to 2022, total incidents 7, civilians 5, 1 security force, 1 terrorist, and total 7. And come to 2023, and the state burns. Right. So I think if you look at the events leading to it, and the political statements that preceded the 3rd of May incident, to say that we did not anticipate that, I think we'll go wrong in that. We should be honest with ourselves. There were certain fault lines which were there to be exploited. And there has always been a mistrust and a distrust and ethnic divide between the Kukis and the Nagas, and the Kukis and the Maitis, and the Maitis and the Nagas. Manipur is a state which gets locked. The Mau-Maram border gets blocked. Everyone wants a Greater Nagaland. Greater Nagaland is part of the other districts of Manipur. Someone has come out with a Greater Mizoram. He wants a Greater Mizoram. The southern districts of Manipur as part of Mizoram. So Manipur has always been a little bit of a not a little bit, a lot of challenge out there. Now, I will not go over what has happened because they've been very well covered out there. But what could be the way forward? Look ahead. I think I agree with Patricia. I think one of the first things that needs to be done, and I will shoot straight, I'm a soldier, I'll shoot straight. I think there is a need to impose the presidency. Right? I do not know the legalities of it, but yes, it has been done earlier in the past. We have always, like I said earlier, we have always come out of difficult situations. Can we follow those models? Can we follow the Kashmir model? Can we follow the Kuki Naga model? It's not to a great extent. Can we follow the Punjab model? Or maybe can we follow a hybrid model? A model typically suited to the present situation, but taking lessons from the previous model. Assam of the 80s was burning, but we could resolve it. So I do feel that if we have to resolve it, certain harsh measures have to be taken. Ethnic divide, the wounds will remain fester for some time, and not for some time, for a lot of time. But we need to get all the stakeholders together, drive some sense into them, get the civil society organization, SCOs, on board, get the prominent people, like the respected people, like the judges. You got social media influencers, you got actors, you got sports persons, some of the defense personnel from Manipur or both sides. Some of the political activists also, get them on board, get them together, and a solution which is acceptable to the Kukis, which is acceptable to the Maitis, address the Kuki concerns, address the Maiti concerns. All can't be addressed, but find via media. Because we have to recognize that the Maitis have concerns also, and the Kukis have also concerns. If we do not get them into inter-ethnic dialogue, I don't think we'll find a solution. And the third party, which is the Nagas, they're very important also. So we'll have to get them on board if we want a long-term solution to the tribal differences which have the potential to make a state burn over the years. Now, coming on to that. One aspect the president, because I agree with he says the present dispensation is not being seen as fair by one of the major stakeholders, which is the Kuki group, basically. And when I say cookies, I mean the Kuki group. All. I'm not talking about cookies in particular, but all Caucasians who are included. So what we need to do is have some. It's been 143 days. Internet has been restored today. Have some immediate immediate measures, and immediate measures is being sustained out there by keeping the two communities separated by a buffer zone, or whatever you call it. But that is not sustainable. It is not sustainable at all. Boots on the ground, 50,000 plus, is not sustainable, and then it is not good for any democracy. We'll have to see a time frame where we need to reduce the boots on the ground by creating certain a conducive atmosphere which is acceptable to both the Kukis and the Maitis also. So in the near to midterm, I think we will have to form these conciliatory groups, get people on board, get them talking, and that can only happen once there's a little bit of a trust in the people who are there. I'm not too sure, though, correct me if I'm wrong, the UHQ, which was functioning under the Chief Minister, has stopped functioning under the Chief Minister. I believe it is not under the Chief Minister anymore. So the security, the security situation, the political situation has to go together to find solutions. And we also will have to look at a little bit of the near to mid term on the economic development. That's very important. Economic development has to take place. Employment generation has to take place. The youth have to come on board. It is a zero-sum game. If the cookies gain, the mighties lose. If the mighties gain, the cookies lose. So that cannot continue. That zero-sum game, as Raj exactly put it. So what we are looking at is basically conciliatory committees, ethnic dialogues, but before that, the first thing that needs to be done is, I think, the president rule. We have had it in JNK for a long time, so constitutionally, I don't think we should follow to that. And the political problem has to find a political solution. Military is not a solution. The Assam rifle is not a solution. The Manipur is not a solution. I don't see why Manipur is seen as anti-cookie and pro-Maiti, and the Assam rifle is seen as pro-cookie, anti-Maiti. I really don't understand. Having been a Assam rifle, Assam rifle comprises of troops from all states of the Union of India. It is a misnomer that some people think that Assam rifle is manned and officered from of the troops from the northeast. No, it is not so. I had troops from Andaman all over, and the recruiting pattern is such. It is not that they are from the northeast. So to say that the Assam rifles is pro cookie, I really don't know. The Assam rifles is a central paramilitary force, and I think they are very fair. They're friends of the hill people. To grade them as anti-Mate would be a very long-term, it'll have long-term impact, because Assam Rifles is the force for the Northeast. It will continue. The army should be moved out. It's peaceful. So we'll have to address all these issues, take them together, and address them. Form committees, form civil society organizations, get all on board, and see how the economic development can take place. Because that I think is the key issue. Every community feels that the other is gaining at my expense. Drugs, of course, as I spoken to illegal immigrants. There can be enough causes, but the fact is that we need peace there, we need prosperity and stability and economic development. I'll end out here, Jan Shankar. I have not been able to give any specific recommendation except for the beginning. The start point has to be president rule, and then surely and steadily thinning out of the boots on the ground of the security forces, because too much security forces visibility is not going to help. Thank you very much. Jai Hind.
Thanks a lot, sir. That was very clear. You gave a message that people have probably, one great section of the people have lost faith in the current dispensation, and that you're quite explicit that you need the president's rule in the state. And slowly but surely, we have to thin out. The boots on the ground have to thin out. And the important thing which you raised is that the perceptions of people as to how they feel have to change. Right. And this is something which Rajat also spoke of in the beginning. He spoke of changing, perceptions or misperceptions which are floating all over. A common thing from all three of you which I've got is you need a bird's eye view kind of a situation, or a committee, or you call it a committee, you call it president's rule, call it. It's one thing is very apparent. The state within itself, I don't think will come up with a solution the way it is, because first and foremost, there are three sets of people with three different sets of ideas. Though at this point of time, only two sets of ideas are in the foreground. So you need something from outside. So my first question, because I see a lot of emotional responses in the comments. I'll not take any of the comments because I don't see very great comments. But I'll take it forward. I'll ask the questions for it. So if you're looking at something outside the state, and I would like, in fact, visualize all three of you to give this answer this question. Outside the state, what are the options we have to move forward to give a solution from outside the state, or a setup from outside the state, without imposing anything on the state? Because any imposed solution will break. And that's the history not only of J&K, it's the history of Assam, it's the history of Punjab, and it's the history of Manipur as well, even before this 5 years of interregnum we had. So I'll first go to you, Rajat. What do you visualize as a institution or thing from outside the state?
Institutionally speaking, I think the only organization that is out there is the Ministry of Home Affairs, institutionally, which has the necessary levers to call in various stakeholders and have deliberations. What I'm told is that there are already several scores of deliberations that have happened in New Delhi. Various community leaders, armed group leaders, uh, civil society, official ones, the umbrella ones, etc., etc., the journalist bodies, all of them have been invited at various points in time to solicit their suggestions and opinions. And in a very delicate manner, there is some kind of reorientation of the expectations on all the community side. So you need professional negotiators to be able to craft that common ground that we've been all discussing here. It is not going to be, if you leave it to partisan players, there will be no common ground. And every problem has a solution. At least we will have to start with that assumption. If we say that there is no solution only, then what's the point of the exercise? uh, what I have seen and been party of some of these deliberations here in New Delhi, I can tell you that there is people are much more reasonable when there is a closed door discussion, but when they have to step out, they have to, they don't want to be singled out who is being the most rational person and try and take a middle ground. The problem is when they step out, they have to play to the gallery, and that gallery is pretty aggressive. If you even make a rational standpoint or a rational position in this whole thing, your community is going to excommunicate you. That is the biggest fear that I have observed in these closed door deliberations. Lot of people, lot of Kuki leaders and the Meitei leaders have been profoundly invested in a peaceful solution to this. Nobody wants to break apart the state and like break apart peace and like lose property and have no faith that these two communities can coexist ever in the future. That is a perception which I don't see. Neither the Home Ministry top negotiators who are negotiating in this have sort of inferred from this. The only point is that how do you create a win-win? There are, as I said, there are discussions around certain constitutional provisions, very very specifically, which can be expanded in its ambit to allow the aspiration of both the communities to be addressed without antagonizing. Those frameworks have already been discussed. There is pushback, but then there is, you have to progress in inches, right? And
Yeah, I agree.
those inch by inch progression is happening. The problem is that certain stakeholders, including all of us, we want instant solution. The problem is that when there have been decades of legacy issue, and especially at this moment when the state is burning, every stakeholder believes, who is in the talks believes that this is the right time. Yahi samay hai jisme you can demand all the demands that have so far systematically been ignored by the Indian state. For example, the Kuki militants, their principal demand back in 2008, for which they raised arm, was a separate state or a separate union territory. That was their principal demand. When they came under SU, the SU's arrangement itself says that no separate state is going to be given to you. That was the ground for suspension of operation. But right now, because of the violence and everything up in the air, including the SU, arrangements up in the air, they believe this is the time to renegotiate everything from zero. And this is where Sam Nam Dand Bhed of Indian state is the only way forward. They have to use that in order to elicit a rational response from all of these stakeholders. You can't be going back and destroying all the 15, 20 years of hard work in negotiations that has gone in, and a lot of sacrifices of our security forces has gone in. You cannot be erasing all of that and starting negotiations from zero. Not going to happen. Therefore, Indian state and the Ministry of Home Affairs is the only institutional body which is equipped to have both a soft as well as a hard negotiation with both the stakeholders. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. So the main issue which you brought out is the Ministry of Home Affairs has to be the principal actor in bringing out peace in the state, and also bringing everyone on table, winding down their aspirations to a common minimum aspiration level and not their maximal positions, and then start negotiating from bottom up, and then see where you can all go. So, Madam Patricia Mukim, I would like you to weigh in on this. You spoke of a Supreme Court monitored committee to do what it is. Rajat speaks of the Ministry of Home Affairs. General Bhatia has spoken of a president's rule. How do you see these three interacting, and which do you? Of course, these are three competing options, if I may. It's not as if they are not exclusive options. How do you see this progressing? How do you think this is progressing in terms of time? Do you think it has to be done by tomorrow, yesterday, or day before yesterday?
It should have been done yesterday. Imposition of President's rule should have been the first option of the Government of India, Ministry of Home Affairs. I do not know why they are dragging their feet on this, because I think this is one of the solutions. You have to bring down the temperatures, and you can bring down the temperatures by removing some of the elements that have raised the temperatures in the first place. I also want to ask, since Rajat seems to know the inside of these negotiations within the Union Home Ministry, are all the negotiators male, men? Because you're talking of militant outfits and all. Who is capturing the voices of those who are suffering in the relief camps? Should their voices not matter? And this, what you have suggested, is a political solution. uh, I feel that the judiciary can come in and ensure that there is a free and fair kind of introspection by the CBI, or interrogation by the CBI into the whole gamut of things. We need to get, we need to get a handle on who are the people propagating this violence, because you have two very extremist groups in the valley. You have extremist groups in the hills as well, but they are not as vehement, as articulate, as media friendly as the groups in the valley. They have been giving interviews, and they have been making hate speeches. We could not, and we cannot even control the hate speeches on social media. If you just go to the Facebook page of Pramod Singh, you can see that the people are being trained to do violence. Can we stop that? Why isn't he, being arrested for hate speeches? We have to do some of these things which are within the purview of the law and order. Otherwise, we are shooting in the wind. And I have to say this: not everyone in the hills, not everyone in the valley are extremists. You know, there are many people in the valley who feel very strongly against this whole thing that is happening around them. But as Rajat says, they can't speak up. And each one has to, you come out of the negotiating table, there will always be the media waiting for you to hear what has been discussed inside. And I know that there are very sane minds in Imphal. They talk to me and they say, we know certain things, but we can't take a stand now because we may be lynched. And they include very influential people, some MLAs as well. It's the same with the hills. So, I mean, unless this fervor, this anger, this hatred, the temperature goes down, we are not going to see any any progress being made. And if there are discussions, I think there has to be some amount of transparency also, because what are these people talking inside these rooms? Are those points negotiable? Are they acceptable to the larger majority outside the room? So this is how I look at this situation now.
Yeah, thanks a lot, madam. Um Taking a cue from what Rajat and you have said, I see a lot of hope. I'll tell you why. If you compare what was happening in Assam in the initial stages when Wolfa, broke out, and those days of Nelly massacre and all that, or for that matter, the initial stages of Punjab uh, militancy, or for that matter, the initial stages of the J&K militancy, you found that we were actually fighting an enemy or a externally instigated sort of people. right, who were just not listening to any kind of reason or any kind of logic which the government of India or the armed forces or anyone from the home ministry or anyone was trying to even put across. Right? We were absolutely at loggerheads. Here, both of you have said that all three communities are prepared to listen to reason. If all three communities are prepared to reason, right, what you have also brought out is there is no platform by which this reason can go out to the public and be made transparent and be made acceptable, because if you say something which is against another one, immediately there's a emotional flare up. So in this context, General Bhatia sir, I'd like your view, because you've seen the maximal and the minimalist models in Assam, J&K, and even in Northeast. Where do you think we need to go forward in Manipur?
I think I agree with my co-panelists. It is the small steps that matter first. It is top down and bottom up both. You need to have a right mix of it. Uh, you have the president's rule. You have a unified command. You keep speaking to the eminent people, the academia, the influencers, but also at the same time, you see, in a tribal society, the Gombodas or the VCCs are very, very important. They shape the on-ground narrative. Of course, today narrative is not only competitive, it's competitive. It is, like Rajat said, you come out of the room and you walk into the gallery. But on the ground level, the Gombodas, the head GPs, the VCCs, the civil society organizations, and Manipur is full of them. Rajat, correct me if I'm wrong. Okay, every 4 men have a society. If nothing else, they'll have some society, one president, one vice president, one treasurer, so that sort of a thing. But get the Gombodas to talk, get the the journalists on board. There are influencers, there are academicians, there are people who have got stakes, they're business people, they're trusted. So my point is that you have a top-down approach where you keep talking in Delhi, which is imperative, which is a must, because that is where the decision is going to come from. But at the same time, start healing the wounds at the ground level. Let the villagers who are neighboring villages talk to each other. They've been living together for ages, and let them start talking to each other. Let's start building trust in them, and that is where I think this has to come both from civil society, and this is facilitated by the civil administration. I do not know how well the civil administration functions today, because civil administration, if it was functional, things would not go to that extent. If the governance was good, it would not go to that extent. And let not the army be the mediator. Everyone, it's very good to fall back on the army. Everything, give it to the army. No, sorry, no. Army is not the right forum. Let people talk. And in Manipur, my experience is dialogues go on for ages. For hours on end, people can talk and talk and talk. Let them talk. Let them vent their feelings. There's nothing. So the main point is, how do move from a zero-sum game to a win-win situation? And when I say win-win, it can't be total win-win, but at least tell the people that, look, okay, in a zero-sum game, this is going to happen. This is what you gain. And the Gaon Buddha look after their tribes. They know what is good for their tribes. So top down, bottom up.
Thank you, sir. I think all three of you have brought out one important thing and one important stream, I will say, which I'll construct, which I got from what you spoke. One is the need for dialogue, and a multi-level dialogue is probably the order of the day. And then second, this dialogue has to be reasonably transparent so that the dialogue and views are not only in closed door proximates. And third, this dialogue has to be carried out by people who have some faith, or other leaders of the society, or the mini leaders of the mini societies, the myriad mini leaders and myriad society, mini societies which exist in the Northeast, right? And then this, everything put together, has to be conveyed perceptually to everyone else, so that the wrong perceptions are not created. Okay, and unless we have this quadrangular thing which on its own going, you will probably not make many inroads into towards a solution. How do you get this dialogue going? That's a short thing answer. Short question. First, your take, Rajat. We'll have this one round and then we'll wind up. Your take, Rajat.
Short take is at least 30 incident free days. If
Before
there are
dialogue?
no for dialogue is happening. It started off way back in May and June itself, and dialogues are happening. The problem is that whenever you see a rationality taking the center stage, one or the other violent event happens, and then videos of the it's like gut wrenching videos coming out
Yeah,
of
I
that
agree.
violence,
I agree
right?
with you.
In point blank range, people are
I
shooting and
agree
right
with
in
you.
the head, and like I can't even put it in words. If first of all, incident free days, if they do not continue for a fixed period of 30 days, the you know the approach to the negotiations are always very hard hitting, as in like both the parties come out with an emotional upsurge and they do not come out and negotiate. The problem is that restoration of faith on rule of law, restoration of faith on government machinery, on the state apparatus, all will happen if there are incident free days. With that not happening, I think that's the challenge, which is why negotiations are stretching and stretching. Every time you reach to a common ground, there is some violent video which is getting surfaced. It is not being discussed in national media because national media's outrage cycle is over, but they are circulating there in Imphal and in
Yeah, that I
hills.
agree with you.
Those things, if they don't stop, I don't see that negotiating ground being created.
Yeah. So
So
actually,
all
what you
everybody's might, be it the army or the state police, everybody's singular task should be to have zero incidence days in at least 15, 20 days, as much as they can put out.
actually what you're describing is a chicken and egg story because you need to have meaningful dialogue. You need peace. To have peace, you need meaningful dialogue. But that's the problem, which is Manipur, which is not new, which is always there, right? It's only that it's got a little more accentuated this time around. Madam, your view on how to start dialogue? Dialogue, transparency, perception. Do you think just the way you said, Supreme Court, uh, appointed committee does the thing, or you think there's any other mechanism we can start by which dialogue starts? Because unless we have dialogue, violence won't stop. Unless violence stops, dialogue won't happen. Is not a thing which is going to work. Something has to break.
No, see, I have to say
Yeah.
one thing. We need to disarm the civilian population. I mean, look
Okay.
at the number of arms that have been looted and looted from the very, in open daylight. They have not been prevented from being looted. So they've been allowed to be looted, and everyone is carrying a gun. How do you have peace in such a situation? Then also, if you want restoration of a peaceful atmosphere, there has to be some empathy from the state. Today the state does not have any empathy, or is seen not to have any empathy for those in the hills. They are not trying to do anything at all to restore that climate of confidence that people from the hills can come to the valley. And as I said earlier, if the chief minister himself doesn't feel that he is safe enough to travel to the hills, where is that climate of peace that you want to bring in? How can you have the guns not booming for 3 days or 30 days? It's just impossible. There are too many arms around. I think in one of these discussions, General Himalay had said any society that is carrying so many arms is bound to be violent. There's no way out.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, madam. So your take on this whole issue of small groups, dialogue, transparency, and perception.
See,
General Bhatia, sir.
I think it was very well covered. One, you have to have incident-free days because we believe in recentism and parentism. I go to the dialogue and say, okay, yesterday this happened or day before this happened. So the complete dialogue process doesn't move forward. So you have to have incident-free days. Let's say you target let's 15 days or a month, and this is not going to happen with 3,500 to 4,000 weapons floating around with ammunition, the civil population. Anyone can, buy a combat dress and behave like a policeman, a Manipur rifleman, or some rifleman, or army soldier, and then go on a spree. It's a very dangerous situation. As a military man, I'm very scared of people with arms which belong to the police, uh, wearing police dress, posing as police patrols or policemen or Assam rifles for that matter, and going into villages. Because that trust is lost. Even when the genuine patrols will go, you'll find problems. So the first thing I think we need to do is two things: get incident-free days and get the weapons back. Telling them to please deposit. I've seen those pictures, boxes, deposit a weapon here, 15 days. It's not going to work. Hard measures will have to be taken, and you have to give a time for the hard measures to be taken. So okay, by so and so date not done, but we getting to you. And I think the intelligence agencies should be aware of who's taken it. They gone to the police armory. I refuse to believe that no one's aware who's taken it. Any society, everyone knows everything in every society. So as long as the weapons don't come back, incidents will happen. And if the incidents will happen, the dialogue will not move forward.
Thank you, sir. If I sum up, we've heard your views, I've thrown some questions. If I can sum up, and my view as to how this whole thing can be taken forward, right, based on what I have. After all, I've served in that area. I've served in one of the toughest areas in that place called North Kachar Hills, which has all kinds of militancies. All these people I used to deal with. And well, if you want to have incident-free days, you need to take hard steps to disarm people, which means the armed forces have to come in. The Manipur police, which was compromised on the first day of this whole story, cannot be a party, cannot be a lead party in any part of the state. That's my view, right? Which means you need to have a unitary command, one force spearheading the whole thing. And which leads us to the thing that, look, it has to be the army and no one else, because I don't see any other thing going. The current way of leaving Imphal and some part of Imphal with Manipur police and the hills with the Assam rifles won't work, right? The second part is the dialogue is a process which has to start with the day you have one incident-free day. The second day, the dialogue has to start concomitantly at some level, at some point of time, and you have to have a proper grid system. And then you need to have good leadership, and that leadership has to be drawn from all communities, right? And then, of course, the whole thing is political in nature. One thing for sure, after 5 months, if a person has not delivered, and if he's still kept in the same chair, we are reinforcing failure, right? And we need to change. If the situation is getting worse and we don't change, there's something we have to really rethink. That's my view. And I think like Rajat said, it could be taken over by the Home Ministry in some manner, like what Mrs. Patricia Mukim said, the Supreme Court committee, what General Bhatia said, President's rule. But all three of them have come out willy-nilly with one say that the state leadership has become dysfunctional. If it had not been dysfunctional, we wouldn't have had 5 months of so much violence. And let me tell you this, I'm saying with the bit of an experience, having been through Assam in the worst times of its time, having gone through Punjab and J&K and this area itself, right? I think what we have come at the end of this whole story today is that we are very clear as to, if you have to look forward, what are the steps to be taken. I do hope someone from the Home Ministry or the powers be see this and take the positive ideas out of this whole story. The positive idea which I take from here is that people are willing to talk. People do have minimalistic positions, but not publicly. In publicly, they do want to have maximalist positions. How do you make this compromise happen? And how do you create that environment by which Manipur goes forward is the challenge going ahead. With this, I'll leave it to this. I'm sure we will generate a report of this, Casa, and forward it to the Home Ministry through appropriate channels. And I would like to thank all three of you, all three panelists, for giving very frank views and candid views, right? And I think all three of you have been very constructive in putting across the problem succinctly and the solutions the way you see fit. A summation of all this might lead us to something better. So I have nothing more to say, General
I think
Gautam Murthy,
it's
sir.
bad form. Can I take a second?
Yeah.
Part. See, one caution. Overuse of the army is not going to solve the problems, right? And we have to also understand that Armed Forces Special Power Act has limitations. When the army is operating against the civilian population, legal scrutiny is going to come in. You are not protected against people who are not carrying arms against the state. Okay. Now, the arms that have been looted are not against the state. So we have to be very careful. Please remember, we had Santosh Hegde Commission, 1528 cases, right? So we have to understand that army is not the solution. Army is just an aid. The solution has to come from the civil administration, the political. It is a political solution. From the ground level, it has to come. Army is just going to facilitate that, right? Provide an environment, a conducive environment for dialogue. But it cannot be the sole thing. So my point is, employ the army optimally and don't overemploy it.
On that, sir, I have no question, because army always goes in aid of civil authority. It is not a law by itself, nor a force by itself, nor an institution by itself to solve the problems. It is always in aid of civil authority. Whether you call it the Armed Forces Special Power Act, or you put the person on a CI grid or everything, it's always in the aid of civil authority. And the civil authority is supreme, as it should be in a democracy like ours. On that, I have no doubt at all. I second you on that. Right. So I have nothing more to say. I request you to sum it up and thank everyone on all our behalfs for having educated us so succinctly.
Thank you very, very much for this wonderfully conducted webinar. Thank you, panelists. I would just take your mind back to 24 years ago, when there were brothers killing brothers, brothers killing sisters, families who had been married into each other in the former Yugoslavia. It was the same thing that is happening, that's playing out in Manipur. And how was that problem resolved? If you recollect the Dayton, Ohio Accords, brokered by Richard Holbrooke, and there was a Swedish gentleman also in that, they got the warring parties together. They got the spokesmen, the leaders of the warring sides together, locked them up, sequestered them far away from Yugoslavia, way out in Ohio, got them to speak to each other and hammer out a solution. They said, nobody's going home till we have a solution on the table. What Patricia very clearly brought out, a Supreme Court monitored committee functioning in this manner, reporting to the Supreme Court only at the end of it, that yes, this is our solution. They don't go anywhere. Take them to Gujarat, take them to Tamil Nadu, take them to wherever, take them to, far away, take them to Karnataka, to a resort somewhere in the mountains or jungles, and keep them far, far away from Manipur. Get them to speak. This is the one way out. And of course, the other steps of having president's rule and recovering arms from the civil population that General K.H. Singh also spoke about in the previous Casa webinar. You can't have a society with so many civilians. In the cities that we live, if so many civilians had weapons, there'd be murder and mayhem on our streets. So this is one solution that we need to work towards. I thank the panelists. Thank you, Rajat, so much. Thank you, Patricia. Thank you, Vinod, sir. And thank you, Shankar, for conducting such a marvelous webinar. Thank our members of Casa for supporting it, and thank all the participants who have taken the time off on a Sunday afternoon to listen to some informed views and some good solutions that have emerged as to the way out of this imbroglio. Thank you all very much. Jai Hind. God bless.
Jai Hind, and thanks a lot once again to everyone, sirs.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.